My guest is Catherine Ziner, or Kathy, and we're going to talk about a really serious subject. You are with Safe Futures. We're going to talk about domestic violence and how it happens everywhere in Connecticut. So it started out, Women's Center of Southeastern Connecticut. 40 years later, it now is enjoying 40 years of success in helping some 6,000 people a year in your part of the state.
Yeah, well, it's slowly going down. We're closer to 5 now, but yeah,
That's a good
5,000, right? 5,000 in New London County every single year.
You're executive director. What does that mean? What do you do for Safe Futures?
Keep the lights on. No. My job obviously is to help set the strategy, to help pay attention to trends, keep us on track, raise money, and just keep things going.
Many people would think this is just a female problem. It's not. You see men as well.
We do.
Are the number of men going up that you see as clients down? Where does that sit?
We are seeing an increase. Back in 97, 98, we were serving about 8 or 9% men. Now it's closer to 26 men and boys. And that, I think, is for a lot of different reasons. I think, one, culturally, we have less patience for women violence, or we're not dismissive of it, so their officers are trained and they make more arrests. But also, I think culturally, we see it especially with the youth that we work on, that women and the girls are about as abusive as the boys in early ages.
Now that may shock some people, but that has to do with social media, I would expect, cyberbullying and just bullying. Do you see, over the years that you've been affiliated with Safe Futures, do you see society getting worse, getting better? Where do we, and can you just speak to Southeastern Connecticut, or can you speak statewide?
Well, I think statewide, and even more broadly, it's a mixed bag. The numbers are going down, but not going down as rapidly as you would think. And I think longer term, what does worry me is exactly the data that we see when we survey kids in middle school and high school, because we see numbers anywhere between 20 and 40% of high schoolers have experienced some form of violence in their relationship. I mean, it may be more modest, and certainly that is the difference between how men and women experience domestic abuse. You see women suffering still more of the injuries, and the severity is greater than the men. For the men, it's often primarily emotional abuse, although there's a fair amount of physical abuse as well. So that's why a lot of the services are directed toward women, because the risks and injury are so much higher.
I see. Part of what you do is outreach and education to let kids know what it is to be bullied. What does it feel like? How to recognize domestic violence. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, and we believe that's critically important. Part of our mission, it's not just about addressing the issues after the fact, it's about preventing it. We feel we owe that to survivors as much as anything else. So we're in the schools. We work with about 5,600 kids a year, and with the little ones, we're talking about
how little?
Well, our curriculum is it can be preschool up to high school. More recently, probably the youngest we're working with now is more often second and third graders, but we do a lot of work with second and third graders. And so with them, we're talking about learning empathy, or understanding empathy, how to solve problems non-violently. Oftentimes the kids are really talking about the conflict with their siblings more often than not. And so we're talking with them about how they work through that. And then, in slightly older elementary school and middle school, we're doing a lot of anti-bullying work. And then in the older grades, we're talking about healthy and unhealthy relationships. And you mentioned it, what we see with the kids is it is a lot of social media. It is texting incessantly. It is
Snapchat, where they think it goes away, but it doesn't.
Oh, absolutely. The sexting is a big part of it. It's also, the boyfriend who looks at a cell phone and to see who, she's been texting all day to keep track of what's been going on. Unfortunately, our kids are getting messages that obsessive relationships and jealousy are ways that you demonstrate love and you demonstrate that you care about somebody. And so it's manifesting, the way they relate to each other is manifesting in very unhealthy ways. And we see that, again, equally boys and girls at that age. And, that sets the tone for the relationships that they'll have in the rest of their lives. So it's really important that we talk to kids at a very early age before those first relationships in order to change that trajectory.
You have places in New London and Norwich.
We do.
Who is the client that calls you in the middle of the night? Can you give me an example?
Well, we're serving folks at all ages, all the way up to seniors. But so it could be a single person, it could be a mom, it could be someone who's you'll hear me use the female pronoun for the victim and the male pronoun for the abuser, just because that is the lion's share of the folks we work with. But she'll call us up and and say, he's at work, I've got 2 more hours to get out of here, before he comes and calls me and checks up on me. And so then we'll work to safety plan to try to give her an idea of what she should pack if she's going to leave. Sometimes the people who call us in the middle of the night, though, just need to talk. We get a lot of folks who don't want to identify themselves. They're ambivalent about whether or not they should leave, and we never insist that they should leave. Mm-hmm. We're there to listen and to help them be safe whether they want to leave or safe whether they want to stay or where they are, or stay in that relationship for a period of time. There are a lot of reasons people don't leave. It could be, fear of retaliation. He could have, she's fear of losing her kids, fear that he will hurt the puppy, all of those kinds of things. Fear of being homeless. Perhaps she's been told her whole life, whether it's from her abuser or even as a young person, that she's too stupid to hold a job, that she's incompetent. And so, after you hear that enough years, you start to believe those things. And so, people choose not to leave because they just don't think they'll make it on their own.
An interesting statistic is 38% of homeless attribute their being homeless because of domestic violence. That was staggering to me.
That's true in our region because domestic violence is a critical or a significant reason why people leave. And I think or turn out to be homeless because they leave and there are no resources.
Either parents or relationships, it runs the gamut?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think people have some stereotypes about homelessness. Homelessness, is not necessarily the 55-year-old drunk who's been sleeping on the corner forever. If you've got a mom with 3 kids who hasn't worked before, if she's going to leave, she may not have resources. It's expensive to live, to rent an apartment in the state of Connecticut. If she's got kids, she may not be able to afford childcare, even if she could get a job. So economic barriers are a real reason why people don't leave, and economic issues are some of the most important ones that we have to address as victim service providers in order to help people transition to a violence life.
Why did you change the name to Safe Futures?
It was really based on 2 primary reasons. One is because we were seeing more men, and we are the only domestic violence service provider in southeastern Connecticut. So if folks were victims because there was an arrest and they came to court, and we help every victim who goes through the court system in southeastern Connecticut, but then they'd come through the court and then we would refer them for additional services, and the only game in town was the Women's Center. Mm-hmm. It's a tough stigma for men in the first place to have to admit to being a victim of domestic violence, and then when the only place you can go for services is a place called the Women's Center, it's just not welcoming.
So it wasn't working?
No, not at all. And the other reason too was because we have such an important emphasis on prevention, violence prevention prevention and school prevention, that the Women's Center just didn't resonate for kids and teens. So we really wanted a name that was saying, you know, we're here for you, and that's why we made the change.
Tell me about the two facilities and how many people you house at any one time and kids, and you also allow people to bring pets.
We do, and sometimes the pets can stay with them in some cases, and other times we find a place to shelter and foster them.
Because they're afraid to leave because they don't want to leave the pet.
Absolutely, and because one, they may be afraid that the pet will be injured, and very often abusers will use pets as a bargaining chip.
Or children.
Yeah, or children, absolutely, and you see them either injuring, threatening to injure, or interestingly, we had one case where every time there was a fight, he would buy her a puppy as a present, and then the next time there'd be a fight, he'd get her another puppy. All of a sudden, she had six dogs, and so it was his way of making sure she would stay.
A control thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I thought it was pretty ingenious, frankly. But so we were realizing increasingly that we needed options for folks who were worried about leaving their animals behind. So we've been trying to develop a more robust network of fosters and ways for people to safely visit, because we also know that pets play an important role in healing. And two, increasingly we see folks who have not just service animals, but emotional comfort animals. And so we're trying to figure out ways to make it, comfortable for people so that they can start their journey in a very in a healing way.
For somebody who is hearing this, who is thinking about leaving, what does a safe house look like when they arrive? What does it look like? I know you don't say where they are.
Right, absolutely.
But what will they find when they get there?
For most places in our area, you'll probably find a big house that seems like a rooming house. So you'll have usually a kitchen where you can share meals and provide support and get to know some other people who've had a similar situation. And there are staff there right now. There's staff there's 24/7. We're hoping that state budget cuts don't affect that, but. So there'll be staff there who really understand and who will listen. For many victims, their family and friends have gotten frustrated with them. Sometimes the abusers cut them off from family and friends, but because the family and friends want them to leave and they haven't been able to make that choice for whatever reason. And so a lot of times victims feel rejected, and our staff is going to listen. And even if people go back to an abuser and want to come back, we will be there.
How long can they stay?
Well, we'll have people anywhere from a couple of days to sometimes even a year. Most of the people who are with us longer are usually folks, maybe they're victims of human trafficking or victims with visa issues who need more time to support. On average, folks stay with us, the average is probably about 35 or 40 days. But we're not looking to put a timer on somebody, but we will work with someone right from the beginning to say, okay, what do we need to do to get you to your next step, and how can we help you?
What about a wish list? What do you need in Southeastern Connecticut to take care of the 5,000-6,000 people that you deal with every year?
Well, we're always glad to have things like diapers and sheets and blankets and those kinds of things that we go through pretty rapidly. Of course, the things that we'll always need most are people to know about us, to be able to talk about the issue, to be able, when their friends or family or co-workers disclose that something's going on at home, that they have our number and say, here, call Safe Futures or call the local domestic violence program in their community. And of course, it sounds crass, but we're always looking for resources, because we are a service business, where we work with folks. It's that human interaction that makes the difference for people, and so we need to make sure that we've got somebody there on the hotline 24 hours a day, or or on call to meet somebody if they want to come and seek shelter with us.
What's most rewarding about this work?
Most rewarding is when you see somebody who comes to us and just feels like they aren't worth anything, and that they're hopeless. And sometimes they won't even look you in the eye, they'll just look down. And then over time you see them blossom, and you see a little smile, or you see them say, you know what, I got this, I can do it. I can go into that job interview, or I can rent that apartment for myself. I can do it. And that just makes your heart sing.
Kathy Ziner, you're a great executive director of Safe Futures in Southeastern Connecticut. Thank you so much for telling me about it, and we'll get the word out. And what is the hotline number?
Our number is 860-701-6000.
24/7.
24/7. Even on Christmas, even on New Year's, we got somebody there.
Kathy, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Pursuits when one they sin. Who is this girl? Spend all night kissing, and if one was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind just to save time. Skip right ahead to the last ride. The harder we look, the less we can see.